Welcome to Kentucky.
The birthplace of Abraham Lincoln and built on the largest cave system in the known world. The home of Daniel Boone, Hunter S. Thompson, horse racing, and bourbon.
But when the hour grows late, the bluegrass state becomes the breeding ground for realms beyond those familiar to the human race. In the east, ghosts, spirits, and ethereal entities roam the hills and hollers.
In the north, Mothman beats his wings along the banks of the Ohio River.
To the west, small green creatures stalk farmhouses and disappear without a trace when shot.
While in the south, the energy of the Veiled Witch is palpable just over the border. Joining with us as we investigate just what goes wrong in the bluegrass night.
And ask the question, how many coincidences are too many? There's no need to check the clock.
There's no need to check the clock. Time is an illusion.
Time is an illusion.
And it's midnight.
It's midnight. In Kentucky.
In Kentucky.
In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. In Kentucky. Lynn Hightower is not only a prolific writer and New York TImes bestseller, but a bluegrass native who spins prose on both her weird Kentucky home and its strange otherworldly inhabitants like no other. From intense spiritual and paranormal thrillers like Even in Darkness and The Piper, to her extra-terrestrial tinged Elaki series, including titles Alien Eyes and Alien Rites, Lynn has always delved into worlds of high strangeness and conspiracy in her works. In her latest, however, she brings the cosmic war of good and evil right back home to Lexington, Kentucky. Tonight on MIK, we sit down with Hightower to discuss the Enlightenment Project, a story detailing the trials and tribulations of Lexington neurosurgeon and possession survivor Noah Archer, as he battles his way alongside best friend and priest Perry Cavanaugh and wife Moira to save the souls of those he himself may have damned to the clutches of dark and demonic forces who once laid claim to Noah's own. In this episode, we touch on everything from the real-life exorcisms that served as Hightower's inspiration and so-called angel possessions to Lynn's own writing process, which involves what some more paranormally inclined folks may refer to as channeling, and why she believes a work of writing is an entity all its own. So grab the holy water, summon your angels, and prepare yourself spiritually, mentally, and emotionally for Midnight in Kentucky, in conversation with Lynn Hightower. Night owls of all times, places, spaces, and ages, we are lucky and honored to have a Kentucky native and prolific author here with us this evening, someone who writes about her home state, the medical field, and of course the paranormal, like she knows them with the utmost familiarity. Lynn Hightower. Lynn, thank you so much for being here tonight. Welcome to Midnight Kentucky.
Thank you very much. I'm thrilled to be on Midnight Kentucky, and I appreciate being here.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So, let's start out, I'm sure with the questions you've been asked a million times. Tell us a little bit about yourself. Tell us about, growing up here in Kentucky. Tell us about the Enlightenment Project. Congratulations on the release of the Enlightenment Project. I've been reading it over the past few weeks, and I have fallen in love with it, as you can probably tell since I talked your ear off about it before we even started recording.
It is the most gratifying thing in the world when somebody gets the story that you're really writing and you get it like from the heart of it. And so you're who I write for. Anybody out there listening that reads this, you have agents, you got publishers, get this, you got that, but all of that is like a means to an end, which is me getting that story in your hands and really, really hoping that you're going to curl up and be, kept
Absolutely.
up late at night reading that.
Absolutely. And I was very much more than I usually am late at night. I would look at the clock and it'd be 1:00 in the morning and I would hit a part and I'd be like, well, maybe just a couple more pages. It'd look up again and it'd be 3:00.
I love it. I
But
love
yes, it hit me deeply as someone, who has studied many of the things that you brought up. And there's so many subtle hints or so many subtle references in the book to paranormal instances and so many things. But yes, tell us a little bit about your history as an author and about growing up in Kentucky and about the Enlightenment Project.
Okay, well, my mother's family is from Kentucky, and so we got here when I was in, I don't know, seventh grade. So this is my place, this is my home, and I was always writing scary stories.
Sure.
And you often, I started my first novel in the fifth grade, and I'd be writing when I was supposed to be listening to geography or math or history or anything like that.
Oh, of course. As a good writer does, right?
Every good writer does that, yes. So that's what I do. And I also used to, and I was always, if I wasn't doing that, I was reading. In fact, they used to have this great big coat closet.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And when everybody went out for recess or whatever, we'd go in to get our coats, and I would just curl up on the floor of the little coat closet, and everybody would go out. And then when they're all gone, I would stretch out on the floor on my stomach and read. And,
right.
And I heard them coming back in. I would go back in.
Absolutely. That sounds so much like my childhood. I can't tell you. I would deliberately get sent in from recess so I could go read my book.
Oh, you're smart. I just hid.
Right.
Yeah. And I remember too, I had my very own tree, and I would go up the tree with a sandwich and a book, and then I'm afraid of heights, so I can go up in the tree, but I can't get back down.
Sure. Right.
So eventually my mother would miss me, and she'd send my big brother out to find me. And he would, push on the bottoms of my feet until I fell out of the tree, and then he would catch me before I hit the ground. So,
right. As big brothers do.
But, it's like, all right, I'll get you out of the tree my way.
Well, and this is what struck me, just getting into the book. You write about Lexington like somebody who knows it, like the back of their hand. We've got Malone's in there. We've got right. Well, that's what I was going to ask you. I know that a lot of your management had come through LA, and I was like, I can't figure out if she still lives in Kentucky, or if she's living in Los Angeles now. So I was actually going to ask you about that. But there's so many little hits. Just about the architecture, about the restaurants. I loved it. It drew the story so much closer to me.
Well, I like, writing about a real place, and I'm just going to write about home. And I have bounced around a lot. I lived in Los Angeles for 18 months, but I'm an East Coast person,
Right. Yeah, for sure.
And I've lived a lot of places and then always come back.
Absolutely.
So I'm back.
Kentucky is one of those states that always welcomes you home, no matter where you've been.
It really is, and I love it here. And do you remember? This were the earliest seeds of the Enlightenment Project.
Sure.
Do you remember the old Turfland Mall movie theater?
Yeah, of course.
Okay. Well, it's gone now, but
yeah.
I was really young, and I saw The Exorcist there. And it was a tornado was hitting, like the wrong time of the year for a tornado, but because they had a generator, they just let us all watch the movie, and they didn't evacuate us.
That is kind of awesome.
We all just sat there and watched the movie all the way through, and then you come out and the city's dark, the electricity's off, there's no lights, there's nobody on the roads. And, there was a police officer that said, I don't know what you're doing out, but go home. There's a tornado coming. So,
but, I totally see that. I totally see that event in the book, having, just kind of wrapped it up. I see how that experience would have totally expanded into the Enlightenment Project. Absolutely.
Yeah, it did. And so I always wondered, I did some research, and I found out that this was actually based on a true case.
Yeah.
With pseudonym Roland Doe, a boy instead of a girl.
Right.
And I always wondered what happened to him. So I did some research, and what I found out was the final exorcism was done by Jesuit priests in 1949 at Alexian Brothers Hospital in St. Louis. and they had been doing other exorcisms, but this was the last one that really worked.
Right.
And he said, okay, I'm free now. And afterward, they sealed up the room.
Wow.
And pretty soon after, the hospital was demolished, and the two priests that did the exorcism died. Okay.
Oh, wow.
But the boy got married, he raised children, he had a career, but he never, ever spoke publicly about what happened.
Right. Right.
So I was just thinking, well, surely that causes a lot of childhood trauma.
Oh, unimaginable, I would say.
Yeah, a lot of childhood trauma. And I actually consulted, I work with other writers on getting their books published. And one of them is a well-known child psychiatrist who works with young children who've been traumatized. And
Oh,
I
wow.
asked her what happened to, Noah, having had that happen as a child. And she did her therapy on him and laid it out for me and how it would affect his life. Okay. And so the most interesting thing she said is, even when you don't remember the trauma, your body remembers.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
And whatever might trigger it, and when things start up again, Noah gets triggered a lot, your body reacts and you don't even know why you're so upset or why you freeze or why you go mute. You can't talk, you can't breathe.
Right.
It's really intense. And I also wondered, would you tell anybody?
Right.
I mean, did Roland Doe tell his wife? How do you say to someone you're dating and you really like, oh, just wanted to let you know that when I was a child, I was possessed by a demon.
Yeah.
But,
Yeah. Right.
But I've had an exorcism. Don't expect it to come back. But so Noah truly is, this is a book about keeping secrets and how that has a bad effect on your relationships. And his wife does find out, and it causes a lot of trouble in their marriage, mainly because, it was a lie of omission. And he didn't trust her enough, to let her know. And he's also felt great shame, that it happened to him. Why me? Why did I get singled out? Why was I weak? So that caused him enormous trauma. But on the other hand, it means that he brings, he's a neurosurgeon, okay?
Right.
But he's a compassionate neurosurgeon because he brings all that terrible experience and trauma he has
Right. Yeah.
To his patients. And so he has a lot more compassion for them than maybe your average neurosurgeon would. Yeah.
No, I love that. And one of my questions to you was going to be, something along the lines of you really start to see how the demons creep in. It's very subtle. And I love the way that you wrote about that, because it is very much, these old things, these lies of omission, these things that, the road to hell is paved with good intentions. Maybe Noah wanted to keep, and this may be the most important question I ask you this episode. Do you pronounce her name Moira?
Oh, Moira.
Moira. Okay. See, that's what I thought. And then I tried to get way too complicated with it. Moira.
Yeah, no, okay. I always love the name Moira.
I love that name. And I thought that was how it was pronounced. So you see, throughout the book, Noah wants to keep Moira safe, yet in doing those things that maybe they're not so they're not such good things as they look like. For instance, keeping his exorcism from her. Those things, that's where that, and I don't want to call them demons, because I love that part where Bennington Jones says angels, demons, these are all just names. That was one of my favorite parts as well. But you definitely see how the darkness starts to creep in with those secrets, and I loved that. I loved that was such a prominent part of Noah and Moira and Noah and Perry's relationship.
Exactly. And so what I love is that Noah, in trying, he's always going to be afraid that it's going to come back. And what is he going to do? Right. And what if it happens to someone else? How does he protect them? So he wants, he's a science guy. He wants a solution. He wants a protocol. This is how I will help someone get through it.
Right.
So, he does this research project where he stimulates the neurons in the brain that affect your spirituality. And one thing that really surprised me when I was researching this, I was studying neuro-religion and spiritual. Our brains are hardwired for spirituality. Did you know that?
As I say on the podcast and on my other podcast all the time, I'm inherently a spiritual person. I'm constantly seeking after the mysterious and God and all of these things. Yet I was telling Jamie when I was reading this book, I said, I think it's made me realize how sometimes I skew the science. I'm very interested in that side too, but sometimes I'm like, well, that'll catch up one day. But the Enlightenment Project really made me realize how much the science, exactly what you said, our brains are hardwired for spirituality, for the seeking of the mystery.
They are. And I think a lot of the science just hasn't trickled down to common knowledge, because when I started researching it, I was like, well, every day it was like, oh, you didn't. Oh, no, that's real. You proved it. I mean, somebody proved that. Somebody looked at it on an MRI.
Right.
Absolutely. Everything I thought I could make up was like already being done, already being proven. So
absolutely.
I'm like, that's so cool. And he, the one thing I love about Noah is, he's creating enlightenment on demand, because if you study neurologists, lots and lots of them try and get their patients to meditate. Right. And they think, look, it's proven. We can show you on an MRI how that will help you in so many physical ways. But like Noah says, the trick is, well, how do you meditate? Okay.
Yeah. Yes.
Because I do, but I believe that they make it too hard.
Absolutely.
I don't think you have to sit with your legs cross-legged if you don't want to. I don't think you have to sit palms up. I find that incredibly annoying.
Yes.
And the idea that you can think of nothing, that's ludicrous.
Yes.
That's absolutely ludicrous. I would tell anybody that's trying to figure out how to meditate is the kind of meditation you need at various times in your life will come to you. So just sit down and sort of daydream and see where it goes.
I love that.
But I think that works, at least for me. I just sit and I think, and I just don't worry about forcing my mind in any particular direction.
Yes.
And that, and that really works for me. And that's a whole lot easier than saying, don't think, hold your palms.
Right.
Repeat, look at the flame. All of that is like trying to distract you from the fact that your knee's hurting because you're sitting cross-legged for too long on the floor.
Amen. Yes.
Oh, so you feel that way too?
It's so interesting that you say this, Lynn, because I have very much developed that same meditative practice. And
really?
Yes, 100%. And it's so interesting because I kind of felt like a fraud for many years. I was like, well, I'm not doing it the way the samurai did it, or I'm not doing it the way that, and I was like, well, I will never reach enlightenment at this place. I'm just sitting down and kind of doing whatever. But then, as in your spiritual journey, you say this in the Enlightenment Project, enlightenment is less about finding who you are or less about finding yourself and more about realizing that you were there the whole time, that you had the answers.
I believe that because the more life experience I have and the more things I go through, the good and the bad, of life, the more I realize that, you're remembering what you already knew.
Yes.
And you're remembering who you really are. And that's kind of thrilling.
It absolutely is. Yes.
And it's very accessible if you just don't listen to what people tell you to do.
I love that. Yes, perfect advice right there. Just
Do
don't
not
listen to.
follow the meditation enlightenment rules, and you're going to be just fine.
And I say this all the time. It's so weird because, and I mean, I guess this is with anything that humans get their hands in. Spirituality is supposed to be this freeing thing, this releasing thing, and so often we do find, just like with everything else, all of these rules set around it. You have to do things this way, this way, this way, this way, and it keeps people from having those experiences. A lot of people from having those experiences, I think.
Yeah, rules from the outside in. Does that make sense?
Yes, absolutely.
It's kind of like the rules people tell to writers, rules that people who don't actually write novels, they read them. They're smart people.
Right.
They come up with all these things like, oh, a writer should do this, a novelist should do that. And they mean well, but these are things that come from the outside in, and they don't work. You write from the inside out and you follow your instincts.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Yes. And well, that brings me to a question I wanted to ask you about the Enlightenment Project, and specifically about, help me out here with Bennington Jones. I have to talk about Bennington Jones. Yeah. And, I don't want to spoil it for the audience. Everybody listening to this podcast, if you are a fan of anything that I have done, you are going to deeply dig this book. So go out and get it right now. But I do want to touch on Bennington Jones because he's such a presence, and he says so many insightful things that but all throughout the book. And this is something that I've kind of adapted into my own, spiritual philosophy in a way. It's very much, Perry says it specifically to Henry at one point. He says, "This is my schedule, not yours." Mm-hmm. And that's very much my dad has always said the worst thing the devil ever does is get you in a rush.
What amazing insight. I love that.
And
yeah. And anybody that gets you in a rush is going to get you in trouble, right?
Yes, absolutely. And it seems throughout Noah and Perry's entire experience, the dark forces are constantly trying to get them to make this move, get in a rush, move one direction or other. Mm-hmm. And then when Bennington Jones comes in, he's like, guys, let's eat some shrimp. Let's drink some beer. Let's figure this thing out. But the last thing we're going to do is rush around and And I think that there is such a spiritual component to that. I mean, there is. And I was just wondering, what your take, obviously as the writer, what your take on that was, because I saw it echo throughout the book so much.
I will tell you that writing this book was magical for me. It feels like, I always think, and you're a writer, right? And everybody out there who's listening, I bet tons of you are writers, okay? So I would be really curious to know if this is how it works for you, but there's this world of people on the outside that are trying to divide us up into pansters and planners, yes, which is insane because writers are both at the same time in every direction, okay? And we don't need people pushing us around. But to me, a novel and a story that you tell is almost like an entity, a real presence. And when I wrote this book, I felt like it was just in a fog all around me, and I was pulling out the threads. All right. And sometimes I would write a scene and a character would say something and I would be like, oh, yeah, that resonates with me. And it would just be like, I didn't know that until they said that, but that's so true, yes. And I had those moments all the way through this book. And I think the more you write, the closer you get to that, because you just open yourself up to it more. Sure, there's times when you got to push the plot, you got to work the logistics and all that, but you also stay open to where the story takes you. And but don't you find that when you're writing?
Absolutely. And in these weird fields in which I dabble, and I'm sure obviously you do too, there are The weirder, the better. There are a lot of people, specifically a lot of authors and a lot of musicians that will say, I wrote this, but I didn't write this. I channeled this. I brought this through from somebody else.
I felt like this is a story that exists that you have to write and you need to write.
Yeah.
So do it. And so I just trusted that. And, a big part of my process is writing by hand for the first draft. I'd key it in and edit it later. And I exchanged some letters with Wendell Berry recently because Wendell was my mentor and my teacher at University of Kentucky. He's my writing teacher.
And the Enlightenment Project starts out with an amazing little prose from him. I love that little quote there at the beginning of it. It hits so perfectly.
Yeah, it is. It's so perfect. And he says that, art in the body, you cannot separate your body from the art that you're doing.
Yes.
So the actual physical act of writing on the page and the tactile ink on the paper, and then you get this beautiful little creative loop. And I do believe my work is much better, much stronger, more spiritual, more resonant when I write by hand. And I ran that by one of my writing clients who is an expert on the brain and neurology and all that stuff. And they said, oh no, that's been proven. I write by hand too. I'm like, science person, you're writing by hand? Oh yeah, because it's been proven, that your neurons work better if you've got this loop of the actual physical act and the time to think and then to put the words on the page. And I'm like, well, got it both sides. So if you're a writer, I respect your process. Try one chapter by hand with a notebook you love and a pen you love and see what you think.
That makes so much sense. And to take it similar level, I often say, you mentioned in there that we are the physical process of our art. I often say that our art is just the reflection of us. Really, the art is the life that we're living, the thing that we're doing, and then we reflect that in our art.
Yes, I totally agree with that.
And
that would explain, I don't know who gets there first, though. If your characters say things that shocked me and I thought were so profound sometimes, I'm like, but I mean, how did that get there?
Yes.
I didn't think of it till they said it. But like you said, I'm really glad to know that. I really love that you said that, that musicians are writing songs or other novelists say, yeah, I wrote it, but I didn't write it.
Oh, yeah. And I'm a musician myself, and a lot of the things I do, jack of all trades, master of none.
No, I think that you're a creative person, and one of your tools is the writing, and one is the musical instrument. No, that is like an integrated, beautiful life.
It is, and I say that I say that a lot, and sometimes I think maybe one takes from the other, but I can't help it. I love them all. I want to write, I want to do music, I want to podcast. It's just,
Do you think they feed each other?
I have come, this podcast specifically has been a spiritual journey for me. The more you gaze into the abyss, the more the abyss gazes back, as Nietzsche says.
That's a little creepy.
Well, but the more I have gazed into the abyss, the more, weirdly enough, the abyss has been like, all right, Benjamin, there is a lot of mysterious things out there. And I think the further I've gotten my own process, the more I've kind of realized we do ourselves such a disservice. Because for a long time, I was the punk rock kid. I wanted, which to say that makes me sound like I was very anti-authoritative, and I was, but I was also the kid that wanted my band to blow up and be the biggest thing in the world, as everybody that plays music does.
Absolutely.
But as I've gotten older, I've realized that all of the art, I think the reason we started making art in the first place as humans is to literally do what you and I have been talking about. It's to show ourselves these spiritual things that only us as the individual artists we are can channel in the way that we do specifically. If that makes sense. Does that make sense?
No, it makes perfect sense. And, musicians, writers, anybody in the arts, it's hard to be huge and big and make big splashes. And there's all these ups and downs, and
Yes.
and writers, we always get discouraged, and a lot of the ones I work with get discouraged. And the way I look at it, that I've had to look at it to stay sane and peaceful, is that, well, my story will find its place in the universe no matter what I do. So I just do my best to be still and let it happen. Right.
I love that. And that's the place that, the more I remember who I am, the more that I remember what my place is, the more I'm like, oh, I just need to do the work. Exactly what Bennington tells Perry. Be still, and if you see something that needs to be done, do it.
Right, exactly right. Because the world has changed from small things, from the bottom up. We can't save the world, but we can do this little thing and that little thing, and that's all we need to do.
Absolutely. Well, that kind of segues into the good that we do, right? And the good things that we as humans can do. And this whole idea that's talked about in the Enlightenment Project, that there are two sides to these things, which I don't think is something that is talked about a lot in exorcism stories, but it's something that, as a paranormal investigator, I hear about a lot. There are instances where people will have these encounters with, these things called black-eyed children that are menacing and evil and awful, and they give off this terrible, vibe. And then there are instances where these tiny, glowing, perfectly innocent looking little girls will appear beside of them and send them away. And there's so much of that in what I do, the divine and the diabolical, and the Enlightenment Project hits on that so much.
It does. And, that's the thing that Noah didn't factor in.
Yes.
That when he creates enlightenment on demand, and this happens to the patients that he's treating, they get to choose what they do with it. And they can go toward light things, or they can go toward dark things. And he's utterly shocked when he realizes, oh no, the project was a huge success. It's just people have free will and they have choice.
Right. Exactly.
And there's the yin and the yang, and the dark and the light, and the unseen world and the seen world.
100%. That's so interesting. I do another podcast called the Ransom Letter Publishing Podcast. It's named after, kind of the production company here. And we recently wrapped our episode on Twin Peaks, which is Twin Peaks Day today. And we kind of use Twin Peaks as a framework to talk about the white and the black lodges. And that's just the same that we're talking about here, right? That's the divine and the diabolical constantly at work.
Exactly. Mm-hmm.
And talk to us a little bit about angel possession, because I don't think that's a very prominent thing that people know about. And I'm interested to hear what come up in your research about it.
Yeah, I had never considered it until I found it in my research. But then when I read that, well, sure, you can have a dark possession, but you can have a light possession too. Well, doesn't that make sense? Because if Noah has his back to the wall and everything is breaking loose, and everything is at risk, and he's about to lose everything. And, but he's not left alone. He's given what he needs, right? And he gets help in the forms of an angelic possession. And what kills me is that this angelic possession is pretty formidably terrifying.
Yes.
And it's not like, oh, sweet, no, I'm here to help you. It's like, you will do as you are supposed to do.
Yes.
And, he tries to negotiate, and it's like, no, this is what you must do. This is what I will do. And, there are always consequences to everything. And what I found is that when that happens, there's this scent of flowers.
Yes.
A very sweet scent of flowers that maybe you've never smelled before. So I was trying to imagine what that would be. And I was just thinking of flowers crushed in snow, like lily of the valley crushed into snow, and how cold and sweet that would smell. And how powerful that is. But I don't think you're left alone with the terrible dark things. I think when you need help, you'll get it. And so how do you know, what's the dark help and the light help? Well, obviously you know it by what it does, right? What the outcome is and what it wants you to do. So yeah, I had a lot of fun with that. And I was astounded when I did the research and found out, wait, what? There's this other kind? Oh my gosh. That's the coolest thing I've ever read in my entire life.
And
so I was pretty excited when I read about that.
Absolutely. Well, I mean, it is an odd phenomenon. And, it's interesting you say, in the Enlightenment Project, I think it's Perry that says something along those lines, which, speaking of Twin Peaks, I can't help but, I told Jamie, I was like, I can't help but see Dale Cooper, Kyle MacLachlan. That's Perry to me. Every time I imagine Perry, that's who I think of. Because, in Twin Peaks, Dale is so calm, so rational, never gets out of sorts. Perry is very much that guy. And Henry Mandeville to a point was Leland Palmer to me. Maybe I'm a bit.
I love Twin Peaks, so I love these associations with the two of them, and poor Mandeville.
Yeah. And it ruined his life. Every time Mandeville would step into the room, I would see that scene in Twin Peaks where Leland is just smiling from ear to ear, and something is just messed up in there, like something is just crawling through there. Yeah, absolutely.
But what's really interesting about Mandeville is what I found in my research after I invented him. So luckily I got it right. Okay?
Right.
There are, exorcism has become so mainstream, okay, that you've got exorcists on YouTube. Demons are texting them, which really blows me away. Imagine getting a text from a demon that said, "She is ours." I'm like, oh my God, that would scare me so much.
Yeah, that's a little bit more creepy than just them calling over the phone, right?
That is so creepy to get a text from a demon. I just
too much. Just call me, demons.
I hadn't even thought of that. I was like, oh no, the exorcist I was setting there, no, it happens actually fairly regularly. And I'm like, oh, your job, not mine.
Fair enough. All right.
But there are two Italian sociologists, okay, very, doing very well in their field. And they, one of them was friends with a priest who worked as an exorcist, who had kept a notebook of 10 years of exorcisms he'd done, detail. And he handed it over to them so they could study it as a sociologist would. Their point was not, is it real, is it not real? Their point was, this is what people believe, and this is who it happens to.
Right.
And what really surprised me is your average person who suffers full-on possession, and let me just say that people that feel oppressed or like something dark is after them, there are all kinds of levels, and really only about 5% are full-on possessed and really back to the wall.
Right.
They are usually male, between the age of 40 and 50, highly educated, very successful in life, with very good jobs. That surprised me.
That is wild. Yeah, that does not seem like that demographic.
The straight and narrow, high achieving dude, that's the one who gets possessed.
Yeah,
that really surprised me. But then I realized, oh, wait a minute, that's who you wrote. So
that is a very good point. Well, I'm interested. Do they think? Is there any theories on why that's your prime possession victim?
No. But it's really quite fascinating, isn't it?
That is very, very interesting. Very interesting.
Well, I mean, if you wanted a high value target,
sure.
If you were something dark and you really wanted a trophy target,
that would be
go after somebody that's really successful, right?
Absolutely. And that brings brings a lot of different things I've heard over my life into question, about leaders, certain authority people, being aliens or demons or something. It's kind of interesting. That is the demographic. But
they were the ones that are targeted. And, I liked what these guys said, after they studied it.
Sure.
Because they feel like they didn't say it doesn't exist. They said, what we're seeing is a fresh look at a phenomenon that intertwines the magical, the religious, and the rational. And I thought that was a really good observation, because I think that's what it is.
Yes. I think, very much like we said at the beginning of the episode, I think slowly the science is catching up to these things. I think in another 100 years, we may, I go back and forth. I wonder sometimes if we will ever have definitive answers, if we as a human race will ever be able to understand the unfathomable cosmic mystery. And then other times I'm like, I bet in 100 years, we'll know what all this is. And our kids will be totally uninterested in it.
Yeah, it will just be like, well, of course, because,
Right.
a lot of people deep into science have a certain worldview that's very non-spiritual. Some have one that is. And, the quantum mechanics guys are just kind of like really upset, because of course, nobody really understands quantum mechanics.
Sure.
But what they said is, well, so energy cannot be destroyed. So part of who you are as a human, you have energy. So if that cannot be destroyed, then there's actually no death. And so they're so upset, because it's like Bigfoot came and sat down in their office and wanted to have coffee with them. They're like, no, you don't exist. What are you doing in my office? And they're so outraged. But
it is 100%. Yes.
Yeah, no, there isn't. And I mean, of course, your body wears out. But I also think that the brain, is a wonderful tool, but it kind of keeps us on the straight and narrow. Yeah. And it filters out a lot of the invisible world. I think it filters out a lot of things that are there and we might be a little bit aware of, but we're too busy, breathe, eat, cross the street, watch local, and the brain is well-meaning. Yeah. But I think you find those kinds of answers with intuition.
Yes, absolutely. And Perry kind of mentioned. Yeah, I'm sorry. Ahead. Well, you say something, there at that ending climactic battle, which I don't want to give too much away of, but Noah comes to Perry and he's holding him up, and Perry's looking off in the distance, and Noah says, I know he can see things that I can't.
Right.
And just with Perry's, developed intuition, with all this he's been through, it's almost like suddenly he is able to see all of these things that maybe he couldn't have before.
And they're not all good things.
Right,
and
right.
They're terrifying. And so he has a really hard time coming back from that.
Yeah.
I love that, because there's all this unseen. And the worst thing is if Perry's looking over your shoulder at something. And it actually happened to me when I was writing, because I would write really early in the morning, 4:30
sure.
and it's dark, and I'm sitting in front of the little fireplace with my giant German Shepherd. Thank gosh for a giant German Shepherd.
It sounds like Tash.
Yeah. That's kind of dozing, and I'd be writing away and kind of scared a little bit, and suddenly she would leap up, look off in the distance, and give this low, menacing growl. And I'm like, oh, what do you see that I don't see?
Yeah.
Make it go away. And sometimes she would settle, and then sometimes she would patrol the house, check all the doors and windows, and she would be so fierce, and I'd be like, oh my gosh, I'm sure this is not really anything, but this is terrible. On the other hand, she's a big, tough girl. And just a lot safer if she's curled up with me on the couch. Sure,
absolutely. No, 100% for her own safety, right?
Right.
Well, it's funny because I reading. I'm trying to phrase this in a way not to give away too much to the audience.
Yeah.
Reading it, I really felt the spiritual nature of Tash. I really felt that she was the animal guardian in a way. Yeah.
Yes.
And I love that. And again, it echoes throughout the book. Noah is constantly going back to her. It's constantly returning to her. She's the comfort of the whole family.
She's the comfort. And, dogs know things we don't know.
Absolutely.
And they take it in stride, but they deal with it.
Absolutely.
And Tash knows when to guard those little boys of Noah's. He knows when something is coming. She knows when something is coming after them. And man, when she goes after the red-haired man who is the insider and the really creepy, scary, sort of human, not human entity in the
which
book,
makes it scarier to me that he's kind of human, but not.
I like when he said, and I didn't know this was going to happen. It just happened in the dialogue where Noah is just like treating him like a human. And he says, you still don't get what I am.
Yes. Yeah.
Because none of what you're doing is going to work.
Yeah.
And then I was like, oh, right. Oh, ew.
It dawned upon you what you had created.
Yes, but Tash always knew what he was.
Yeah.
The dog did. The dog knew, and the dog was like, nope, gonna kill it.
I'm going after it. I don't know if are you familiar with the Skinwalker Ranch in Utah at all?
No, sounds fascinating.
It is a intense place. All kinds of phenomena from, in my research, as I've gotten deeper and deeper into these things, I've kind of seen how the phenomena itself, dark, light, it works together. Where you find UFO sightings, you will find poltergeists, you will find cryptid sightings, you will find, it's the phenomena of many faces, as I term it, or not my term. I stole that from someone much smarter than me. But it's many faces. It shows itself in many different ways. In Skinwalker Ranch, it's this history of these people owning this ranch and constantly facing dire wolf-like creatures, UFOs constantly, possessions, maybe not possessions, poltergeist happenings, and if I remember correctly, there have been some possession encounters. But the reason I bring it up is there was a government study of Skinwalker Ranch by a private contractor called NIDS, National Institute of Discovery Science, and they would use dogs as natural biodetectors. They knew every time the dog started barking that they were going to get some phenomena on that something was about to happen. Yeah.
Brilliant. Because dogs know and dogs see, right?
Yes.
And dogs will protect, and dogs will not hesitate. They won't go, gee, I wonder what that is. They go like, I know what that is. I'm taking it down.
I'm going after it. Yes. 100%.
Yeah. That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I've always loved that story. I've told that story many times, and when I noticed that connection with Tash and with Noah and the boys, and I love that. I was like, yes, that is perfect. Yeah. I actually have a painting hanging here in the studio that's of a dog, and he's staring through a blank door, and the dog is barking at this black door, and of course, you don't know what's on the other side of the black door. I've always loved that painting. It's dogs very much are. Yeah.
Dog knows.
Yes, absolutely. Dog, they know when these things enter into our reality.
They do.
One of the very simple things, a couple of very simple things I just wanted to note with you. You were talking about Roland and the original exorcism.
Yes.
And you mentioned here in this first paragraph, as soon as I read this, I was like, my heart is moved. The 14-year-old girl who wanted to work for NASA when she grew up. Of course, Roland grew up and worked for NASA.
Oh man, I didn't know that when I wrote that.
You didn't know that?
No.
No way.
No, that's because the story knew it, but I didn't. So that thread in the fog. He worked for NASA?
That blows my mind.
Listen, this is a mysterious writing experience.
It is. And I gotta say, Lynn, I have this whole conversation, I have loved how you have talked about your writing, because it's very much like, yeah, this is just something that moves through me. I'm just the conduit.
Yeah, that's what it feels like. I might as well just admit it.
Sure. I mean, You're at least we're at the. I think about that a lot, and I'm like, the very least I can be is a good conduit. I can,
Well,
if I
I
can
think
channel it.
I think it just takes courage to make that leap.
Yes, yes.
Like, I think the more I write, the more I know, oh, the story is there. It will come. So there's no point sobbing in the floor. You'll get it used to be I'd sob in the floor.
Sure.
Didn't help.
Delete a couple drafts.
Yeah, but now I know, the story is real. It's there. It's an entity, and I'll pull the threads out of the fog, and it will come.
And you're absolutely right. I wanted to comment on that earlier as well. These stories are entities in so many ways, right? They are these ideas. I mean, reading this book has shown me so many things about my own personal journey. And I think that's being a writer.
Yeah.
You identify those things with characters, right? You pull those things out when you're reading those things. Absolutely.
That's true.
That still blows my mind. That wow.
The NASA thing, I'm just absolutely.
Yeah. And I always thought that was so weird. I was like, wow, why would a boy that was possessed grow up to work for NASA? That's, I've always thought that was
makes sense to me.
But wow, that's mind-blowing. The other thing I wanted to note, and of course this is the obvious, I'm a very symbolic person. I like pulling the symbolism out of things.
Okay.
Your main character's name is Noah Archer, someone who led people through a great flood, and then that last name Archer, a warrior, someone who fires back, at things that they may not necessarily be able to see. I was just wondering, was there any conscious decision on the name for Noah? Because he very much is Noah. I honestly expected that, with Perry's, and I don't want to mention it to the audience, but with Perry's lineage, I almost expected that to pop up. Then I was like, nah, it's a little too much. I was just wondering if that Noah name hit when you were writing
it was a complete thing where the character appears in my head and tells me his name. I am Noah Archer.
Sure.
I did not look it up. I did not think, well, Noah, that'd be a great name for a guy going through something like this. It was like, no, it was like, here I am. My name is Noah Archer, and no other name would do. It wasn't on purpose, but it does make perfect sense, doesn't it? That he'd be Noah and Archer. That's pretty cool.
I mean, yeah, as you have told me,
it's almost over my pay grade,
It does. I mean, I always say, I'm always honest. I'm always like, yeah, I didn't really realize that. But then I'm almost like, I should have just took credit. I should have took credit.
Well, I think we don't realize it, but it's true nonetheless.
Absolutely. And honestly, that's the sign of the best writers, in my opinion. People who just let it go. You know what I mean? It's there.
The more I write, the more I just trust it. And in a way, it's like you just have to give yourself permission to be brave.
Sure.
And just wrap your arms around it. And then it's easier.
Absolutely.
And better, and it takes you interesting places. Yeah.
One of the last things I wanted to bring up, this last climactic scene, there is something happening with Noah, and you break it down so well. It starts so simply, and it says, I'm the problem. And then he just slowly starts to collapse into himself. Yeah. And, I myself have been at that place. I know listeners of the show have been at that place. And you described it so perfectly, that little voice that sneaks in, that little darkness, like we were talking before, that little sense of darkness. I suppose I'm just complimenting you here, Lynn, but it was amazing. It was.
But that's what happens to you, isn't it? That's what makes you vulnerable.
Yeah.
That voice in your head that's like, it's you.
Yeah.
You're the source of the trouble. And you're just like, oh, I give up.
Yes.
And so how do you, I just think it's something that a lot of people can relate to. And people have those moments where they really feel that. I mean, you believe it all through, and then you have to find your way around it. But that's not easy, and anything dark around you is going to push you right into that.
For sure. You have to be very careful in those moments that You don't give into that darkness that's already knocking at the door, probably.
And that's how it gets to you. You know, that's how it infiltrates.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Well, Lynn, this has been such an amazing conversation. I do have one more deep philosophical question for you, since we're talking about deep philosophical things, if you don't mind.
I don't mind a bit.
So in writing the Enlightenment Project, in going through this journey, because I write 30 pages and it's a journey for me. You've written close to 400 here. I know it's a journey for you. And taking this journey, what of the mysterious, what of this other world, what of the divine and the diabolical would you say has presented itself to you? And I'm sure that there's a lot, obviously, with this story, but what is one of the most pressing or urgent things that you feel like, that this great mystery upon taking this journey with this book has shown you?
Oh, well, Noah says it at the end of the book. And he says, life comes at you with good things and bad things, and none of that matters. The only thing that matters is who you love while you're here.
That is such a good line. I read that line again earlier today, and I was like, yes, that's the heart of it.
I didn't come up with that. Noah said that. And I'm like, oh, thank you. Those are words to live by. Yeah, absolutely. But I believe that. I do believe that.
Absolutely.
I do. Yeah.
Well, Lynn, this has been such an amazing conversation. Again, I loved the book, The Enlightenment Project. Let everybody know where they can find you, when the book will be out, where they can get a copy of it.
The book will be out on March the 1st, which is what, Tuesday?
I believe so. Yeah. Jeez.
Yeah. And you can, the easiest place, it's available everywhere, but the easiest thing to do is go to my website, which is lynnhightower.com. And it's got all my books, and on the Enlightenment Project, there are links to any kind of bookstore you want. Okay. Independence, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Bookshop, wherever you want to buy a book, you can click, it'll take you right there, and you can do it that way. That makes your life interesting. And there's a fabulous picture of my dog. That's what it is, anyway.
Absolutely. That's the reason. That's the real reason. Yeah. That's the reason. Keep you spiritually sound.
Sure.
Well, Lynn, thank you so much. This has been an amazing conversation. Hope to have you back on again sometime to talk about
I would love that. I had a great time. You're wonderful to talk to.
Thank you so much. It's been amazing. Not else. We will be right back after this. So there you have it, Night Owls. Such an amazing conversation with Lynn Hightower that hit on so much, leaving us so much to take away from it. I want to thank Lynn one more time for coming on the show. Even though the Enlightenment Project is a work of fiction, there's a lot of fact in it, and obviously Lynn put in a lot of research into this book. And, as we mentioned in the conversation, there's a lot of science in this book, a lot of science that points to humans being beings who are constantly searching for meaning and spirituality and these great mysteries that we talk about on this show. And there's a lot of nuance to the Enlightenment Project, a lot of nuance that I think you would have to be in this field for a long time to pick up on, and that Lynn just automatically intuited it into her writing. One of those, which we mentioned in the show, is how Lynn showcases how demons, as we're going to call them right now, but of course, going back to the conversation, going back to the Enlightenment Project, demons, angels, these are all just names that we give to these things to better understand them. But for now, we're going to refer to them as demons. So, Lynn does an excellent job of painting how I have heard so many people talk about how the demons creep in. It starts with that little voice telling you that you're not worth it, that you're worthless, that you're shit, that you don't deserve what's happening to you. And then that voice slowly grows and grows and grows until you have all manner of nasty shit inside of you trying to take over. And we see that in the physical realm too, right? We see that with the Bell Witch, whose voice slowly grew until it was an entity that was all-consuming the Bell household. We see that with Skinwalker Ranch instances. It's all of these things that we slowly allow ourselves to get more and more involved in. Either we engage with it in ourselves, we engage with it outside of ourselves, and it keeps going, keeps growing until it becomes something that has to either be removed, by shamans or priests like Perry in the book, or something that we have to deal with ourselves. Which is a really good segue for another part that Lynn and I talked about in our conversation, which is her use of the divine and the diabolical, which we've mentioned on this show quite a bit. These opposing forces of the universe, good, evil, dark, light, divine, diabolical, whatever you want to call them, and how they interact with each other, how we see these forces interact with each other in paranormal and supernatural encounters. Like Lynn and I were talking about, the black-eyed kids, the instance of the black-eyed kids encounters with these white, glowing, angelic almost appearances of little girls who tell them to go away. And of course, much like with Sasquatch and UFO sightings coinciding, those instances are rare. Those are rare reports, but there are enough reports that I think it's worth looking into, and I think that we do get a very good picture of how the divine and the diabolical either work together or oppose each other or something, and how we see this constantly throughout paranormal investigations. I mean, shit, that's all of religion, right? We constantly see that in different forms of religion, different forms of spirituality, and all those are paranormal instances that we've given a spiritual nature to. And obviously not all those are, that goes much deeper, but you all know what I'm saying by now, surely to God. Which, kind of brings us to the whole angel possession aspect of the Enlightenment Project, which I don't want to go too far into talking about it in the book. I want you guys to read this book. It's an amazing book, and even though it is a fiction book, there is so much that we can take from it as investigators or those just interested in the nature of how the paranormal and the supernatural interact with us. But, Lynn does touch on angel possessions in this book, and that's a lesser known aspect of a lot of possession encounters, a lot of exorcisms. But, it's something that's talked about in magic. It's something that's talked about in different forms of religion. Obviously, it's talked about in the paranormal with, these beings of divine light that enter people. But the occurrence that comes immediately to my head and came to my head when I was reading the book is Damien Eccles, who, has elaborate rituals to channel down his archangels and guardian angels, which if you guys are interested in that type of thing, definitely recommend it. I'll include a link in the show notes to his YouTube channel. But the idea of channeling angelic beings is one that goes back as far as human history. We have the Enochian language that was supposedly channeled by John Dee, a world famous magician from way back in the day. I'm not going to quote centuries because I'm going to get that shit wrong and somebody's going to email me about it. But, the idea of summoning angels or being possessed by angels or calling down angels is something that a lot of traditions have talked about. And something else a lot of traditions have talked about, and, that we talk about a lot on the show, that Lynn directly references in the Enlightenment Project several times, is that animals, dogs specifically, can act as biodetectors for these type of phenomena, for any of these type of phenomena, that they see much better than we do when it comes to these things. And, that goes, again, right back to the science, the visible light spectrum. Animals have better sight of the visible light spectrum than we do. Dogs especially have better sight than on the visible light spectrum than we do, like thousands of times better. And as we talked about in this conversation, Skinwalker Ranch, and I've talked about this shit a million times because I think it's so cool. But how when Nids was doing research at Skinwalker Ranch, the dogs were the first instance that a phenomenon was about to start up or kick in. I gotta say though, one of my favorite parts of this interview, and definitely one of the parts that I expected the least, was basically how Lynn came on and talked about her writing process, which, again, Lynn, thank you so much for doing that. I got so much out of that. And, a lot of Lynn's suggestion to writers was just trust the process. And, that's not only something that, I value as a writer, and I definitely, would push that to other writers, trust the process. But, talking about this in the lens that we do on Midnight in Kentucky, that's almost like a channeling process, right? And Lynn talks about this immediately when Lynn started talking about how she wrote the book. I got the same vibes I get from people that tell me about supernatural encounters, that tell me about UFO sightings or Sasquatch sightings or any of that stuff. It was like Lynn had a supernatural encounter and continued to have a supernatural encounter. She phrases it, she was in a fog throughout the entire writing of this book. And it's like the ideas and the characters were speaking to her, and she was pulling this out of the ether. And we hear that so much throughout the history of creative people and inventive people. This phenomena is actually so common in arts and invention circles that it's been studied in different research papers. And it's even been given a name, or it's been lumped in with mediumistic art, which can refer to several different things in art circles, of course. Mediumistic art is also channeling art or message from spirits directly. But there are plenty of artists who talked about channeling their works. Van Gogh, for instance. Plenty of musicians. As I mentioned in the conversation, I feel like I've done that myself many times. But there are tons of other people who have channeled their works. Nikola Tesla, Albert Einstein, Carl Sagan, Carl Jung. So there are several different inventors, authors, writers, artists who have said that, they have pulled their ideas out of the ether. And of course, different people of these, different people attribute this to different things. They play into the paranormal, spiritual side of it more. But, I've heard rappers talk about saying that, they'll spend 6 months on a song and it'll be a great song. But the really amazing songs are songs that they write in 3 minutes that they feel like they're just pulling out of the air. So that's a common thing. And I loved that Lynn talked a little bit about that because, she says throughout the interview, she says Archer or Noah says that. I didn't say that. And that's kind of the whole thing that Lynn refers to when she says that different works are entities within themselves. And that's something I ponder on a lot, about how ideas can become things within themselves. They can infect us. They can speak to us. They can move us. And you guys see how that would play into the phenomena at large. I mean, if those things can become, egregores or things like that, then what about cryptids that we see every day, or lights in the sky that appear to us and appear to humans every day? And in that channeling style, in Lynn's intuitive nature of pulling these things out of the ether, one of the most interesting things to me was the fact that in the first paragraph, she mentions this little girl. Now, this little girl wants to grow up and work for NASA. And of course, this book is all about exorcisms and demon possessions. And the most famous exorcism of all time, the one that inspired the film The Exorcist. And of course, me and Lynn spoke about this during our conversation, was that of a little boy named Roland, or somebody who was given the name Roland. His name is now known to the public. You guys can look that up, find it out pretty easily. But Roland goes on to work for NASA, which I thought was a startling aspect of the story, especially considering all the things that we've talked about with NASA here on the show, or that, we've mentioned indirectly about NASA, with Jack Parsons, an adept of Aleister Crowley, going on to basically build the foundations of NASA. And then we have Roland, this boy who was supposedly possessed by demons, going on to work for NASA. That's interesting, right? We've got a lot of weird shit going on at NASA, and that's not even bringing in Project Paperclip, where they brought the Nazis over to build it. But the most fascinating thing on this, and before I get into that, let me say this: Astonishing Legends has an amazing episode. I think they have 4 episodes on the entire exorcism of Roland Dole. And like I said, me and Lynn get into it a little bit here, but if you guys want to hear more about that, check out their episodes. Great stuff. I'll include it in the show notes. But one of the most fascinating things to me is that Lynn, mentions this little girl wanting to grow up for NASA in this book about demonic possessions and exorcisms, and Roland Dole, the most famous exorcism of all time, goes on to work for NASA. And as you guys heard during the course of this conversation, Lynn had no idea about that. So, again, one of the most exciting and interesting things in this whole interview to me was Lynn's writing style, and how, she says, learn to trust yourself as a writer. Learn to pull down those things that whatever out there is entrusting you with. And I think that that's really good advice, not only for writers, but for anybody. Learn how to trust yourself enough that these spiritual forces can move through you. And obviously that comes with a disclaimer: don't let any bad shit in. Know what you're inviting in. But I thought that was really interesting, and I thought that was really good advice. So, as I said before and after and during our conversation, everybody who likes this show, everybody who digs any of the shit that I've ever done, is going to love this book. The Enlightenment Project, as Lynn said, you can get it right off her website. If you guys support small booksellers, if you guys don't give a shit about any of that and want to buy it right off Amazon, there are literally tons of ways to buy this book, and they're all right there on Lynn's website. And as for my feelings on the book, I couldn't get enough of it. I read it in 4 days and then reread it before our conversation. So much in it. As for Lynn's knowledge of Kentucky, there is so much from Lexington in this book. Down to the street names, down to them going to Colton Steakhouse. Eastern State is mentioned in there a couple times. So there's so much Kentucky in this book that I know you guys are going to love. And Lynn writes about the paranormal like it's second nature to her. She obviously understands the in and outs and nuances and the psychology and the philosophy of all these things. And, aside from that, she's an excellent horror writer. There are points in this book that are going to punch you in the stomach with how fear and psychologically, inducing the events are, and just some great stuff. So the Enlightenment Project, guys, it's out now. Obviously, I didn't hit that date of the release of the book, but I'm kind of glad that we're getting this out a little later, just to remind everybody that might be listening to this how great of a book this is, and that you guys should go out and check it out, because I know you'll love it. And as long as I'm selling shit to you, go check out the Midnight in Kentucky website. You guys can see everything that we're doing over there. We kind of revamping, changing things around, adding some stuff. We got the blog going now. We're having, there's Kentucky Case Files over there. From the last episode, you can check out all the monsters, the water monsters that we talked about on that episode, in their full glory and their full case file, and read up on all that. And we've also got sighting reports up now, where those used to just be on our Facebook. You can now go to our website, check out all the photos, check out the details of all the sightings that are sent to us. That's really cool stuff. And like I said, there's the Midnight Kentucky Facebook, always engaging with people over there, constantly talking about weird stuff. You can find all of our goings on and anything strange that we're getting into on the Facebook. And Facebook has ratings and reviews, and we always appreciate those ratings and reviews. So if you guys can get over to Facebook, leave us some likes, some comments, and those ratings and reviews. That helps out a shit ton. Slowly getting back into the RLP Instagram. Check that out if you guys want to. There's Midnight Kentucky stuff going on over there. There's poetry stuff going on there, writing stuff. Everything that we do at RLP is going up on there. And the Ransom Letter Publishing YouTube has finally been updated. Every episode from Volume 1 of Midnight Kentucky is up over there. Been working on that for a while. Proud to say that you guys can go over there and check out all those episodes now. And the episodes from Volume 2 are upcoming. Can't decide if I want to throw those up just as the Sprecher or if I want to make the big elaborate videos out of those. You guys tell me, would you rather have them fast and easy, or would you rather have them artistic and movie-esque? Because that's going to take a little longer, but I'll be happy to do that, and I think it's cool and fun to do that. So whatever you guys want, I will totally cater to. But for real, give me some opinions on that. Also, the Ransom Letter T Public, we just added 2 new Midnight in Kentucky designs. We've got the bluegrass cryptid aquarium design up over there. Stickers, masks, tote bags, pillows, t-shirts, of course, hoodies, whatever you guys want. You can get that design on it. Coffee mugs, I dig those. And we've also got the Stupidly Strange t-shirt, Stupidly Strange sticker. I saw something strange in Kentucky, and all I got was this stupid insert word here. And it's got a little UFO on it. The t-shirt's really cool. It's got a badass back design on it. So check that out. We're also working on getting Ransom Letter Publishing designs up on there. So, cool stuff. And in addition to that, as far as merch goes, I'm going to keep trying to sell y'all shit. Jamie is launching the Big Cartel. Hopefully the next few months, next few weeks, something like that. We're taking it slow, seeing what we can do. There's all kinds of designs on there. We can custom make whatever you guys want. So check that out. We've already previewed it a little bit on the Facebook. Go over there and check it out. Really cool stuff. And Jamie's taking pre-orders now that you can hit her up with if you see anything you want, or if there's anything at all that you've heard on the show that you're like, that would be badass on a t-shirt, then we can do that. She can do that. And I'm going to go ahead and say that I reserve the right to steal that shit and make it into a t-shirt of my own, though, and mass produce that shit. So if you do that might happen. But, you can be on the front lines of designing for Midnight Kentucky and Ransom Letter Publishing. And, of course, the MIK Patreon. Shit's always popping off over there. Not as much as I would like for it to. Real life hits we don't get to record like we should, but we're doing amazing stuff. We've got the news program over there. We've got Transmissions from the Abyss. We've got what else we got? We got Transmissions from the Abyss, the news show After Midnight, which is always fun and a lot more candid, and us just talking shit. We've got the T-shirt club where you can get exclusive T-shirts. We've got the sticker club where you get exclusive stickers. Just a lot of stuff. Go check that out. I think you guys will like it a lot. And speaking of being more candid, if you guys get the chance and want to check it out, check out the Ransom Letter Publishing podcast. We got 2 episodes up over there already. More definitely on the way. It's snowballing now. We're getting interviews. We're getting shit going. Much more candid. Much more loose than Midnight in Kentucky. Obviously, Midnight in Kentucky has a very set thing that we want to talk about on the show. But if you dig it when we start talking about magic and just start bullshitting and talking about politics and controversial shit, you're going to love Ransom Letter Publishing. Also, RLP has a lot of my writing, a lot of different songs that I've been in, a lot of different bands I've worked with, different bands that, we've produced here at RLP, and different artists, all that stuff. So if you guys are into that, check out the Ransom Letter Publishing podcast. And as always, ratings and reviews are the best way to let us know that you love us. That's on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Facebook, wherever you can leave a rating and review. Leave us a rating and review. We love that. It means so much to us. And before we go out this evening, I want to send one more shout out to the crew over at Pennyroyal for having me on the As Above episode that debuted a couple weeks ago. It was great to talk to those guys. Show's excellent. I'm hoping to get Nate or Kyle or Darian on the show again, hopefully all three again, very soon, and talk to them about this last season of Pennyroyal. And a very quick apology to Nate. Sorry for using up your F-word budget on my 5-minute segment there. But I really appreciate you keeping all my fucks and shits. That means the world to me. Didn't censor me. Thank you for that. That's going to do it for tonight, Night Owls. Hope you enjoyed it. Till the next moon rises. For Midnight in Kentucky, I'm Ben. Good night.
You've been listening to Midnight in Kentucky,
a Ransom Letter Publishing podcast.
Join us on Twitter and Facebook.
Or get in contact with your questions, comments, or stories of high strangeness
at midnightinkentuckypodcast@gmail.com.